It's the heat of battle. The earth shakes from detonating shells. Bullets and shrapnel are flying everywhere. Overhead in the skies, there are fighters strafing and bombers circling. In those situations, you want nothing more than a meter or two of good solid concrete between you and the enemy. You pretty much want a German bunker. I'm Indy Neidell. This is a World War II special episode about bunkers. The German bunker is one of the most intimidating structures of World War II. These fortified pillboxes and massive gun casemates are designed to hold during an enemy push and take the beating of bombs and heavy shells without collapsing in on themselves. But their construction is quite demanding in both resources and manpower. All bunkers must have one thing in common: the ability to withstand or deflect the blast wave of an explosion. Overpressure caused by exploding shells and bombs will bend and break regular structures, and their inhabitants will suffer ear, lung, and other internal injuries. A bunker's purpose is to negate this physical compression by simply being tough enough to absorb it. Cast in reinforced concrete and sealed by heavy blast doors, these vaults are not easily affected by the expanding pressure. However, the Germans used the word bunker in their military terminology quite freely. From small pillboxes to enormous subterranean superstructures, they all come under the general heading bunker. The major difference to basic field constructions is that those are usually made from materials that are locally available, like gravel, lumber, sand, and rocks. Real bunker building usually begins with the addition of concrete. To be strong enough to protect troops from shrapnel and small arms fire, the roof and the walls of pillboxes have to have a thickness of at least 40 to 60 centimeters. But bunkers fully made out of concrete, often reinforced with steel bars, are usually around a meter thick. Those can withstand aerial bombs of up to 50 kilograms or direct hits from 105 millimeter artillery. More permanent structures are built around industrially prefabricated concrete blocks that have a thickness of at least 2 meters. They can withstand 500 kilo aerial bombs or 220 millimeter artillery shells. The strongest bunkers in the field go up to a construction strength Baustärke of up to 3.5 meters of thickness. These are often used for headquarters or to protect a large concentration of troops and equipment. Such walls could withstand even the heaviest artillery shells for most of the war. Heavy command bunkers are also outfitted with wireless, a heating and water filtration system, and protected against gas warfare as well. The Germans have advanced the art of bunker building by standardizing their designs into so-called Regelbau designs. There is a list of easily 100 different bunker designs that can be ordered for specific purposes. This way, they can quickly fortify strategic locations by building intimidating fighting positions that are difficult to dislodge or destroy. But aside from those standardized field constructions, the Germans also have created a series of super heavy bunker structures. For example, beginning with the second half of 1940, the Germans tried to secure the captured French naval bases at Brest, Lorient, and St.Nazaire. The Kriegsmarine wants to use the Atlantic coast as their new operational area because of the proximity to British convoy routes. However, plans to use the surface fleet in those harbors have fallen flat, as continuous British air raids do heavy damage to the ships in port. The German Admiralty proposes using giant camouflage nets, hundreds of smoke-making machines, and a fleet of barrage balloons, but this is all in vain. By the end of 1940, they admit defeat and withdraw the surface fleet, but they move in the U-boats. Now, submarines have a much smaller profile than surface ships and occupy way smaller berths. The Admiralty thinks of building a line of protected U-boat shelters, but Organization Todt tells them to think bigger. Under the guidance of Dr. Fritz Todt, the specialized construction organization begins planning for enormous sheltered pens that will house workshops, repair stations, and storage rooms under meters of concrete. It is one serious endeavor that begins in the harbors of Brest, Lorient, and St.Nazaire. For the first two super bunkers at Lorient alone, Karaman 1 and Karaman 2, OT allocates 60,000 train carloads of building materials, and not just concrete, but things like prefabricated ceiling supports and iron beams. Various German construction companies and French subcontractors employ thousands of workers, not only French, Belgian, and Dutch, but also Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese, all housed in gigantic work camps. In fact, The German bunker building program on the Atlantic coast provides one of the most attractive and well-paid jobs in wartime Europe. Karaman 1 is such a superstructure that it houses thousands of employees under its roof, stores and cinema included. The German desire for standardization affects the U-boat bunkers as well, and their designs become quite similar. The roofs are at least 3.5 meters thick, unbreakable at the time by even the strongest bombs. Concrete is poured over curved head iron rods, and the structure is held by specialized steel carrier frames inside the roof known as melan carriers. Additional concrete beams, called fangrost ribs, are set up to explode the bombs above the roof and deflect the blast to the side. The whole thing is held aloft by pre-stressed concrete support beams that transfer the weight of the ceiling to the side walls. Some submarine bunkers even get another shell of concrete walls around the bunker to house the workers. On the waterfront and at the shore, entrances are protected by armored revolving gates. Additional nets are set in front, below the waterline, to protect against torpedoes and even midget submarines. On the land side, the bunker is accessible via a loading passage and a railway track. To arrive at the engineering stations and torpedo workshops, each worker must pass lines of barbed wire and hidden machine gun nests. By the end of 1942, the Germans have completed 5 major bunker complexes on the Atlantic coast: La Palisse, Bordeaux, Lorient, Brest, and St.Nazaire. They have 70 submarine berths, which are basically untouchable by any Allied bomb. So for months, no U-boat in port is lost and no major delays occur in the repair service. Submarines are valuable, but there is of course one man who is more valuable to the Germans right now than anything else. The first official bunker complex to protect Adolf Hitler was built in 1936 underneath the Reichskanzlei in Berlin. The Führerbunker has 3 secret entry points that lead into a gallery of 12 underground rooms, protected by a 1.6 meter strong roof. However, for most of the war, Hitler spends very little time in Berlin, so this has become just one of many Führerbunker in German-controlled territory. Some are built inside railway tunnels, like the Wulfschlucht bunkers in France. Others, like Wasserburg near Pskov, are set up underneath old chateaus and castles. All these Führer headquarters become huge command structures, outfitted with conference rooms, accommodation facilities, and defensive bunkers. Then there is the Wolfschanze, a top-secret headquarters in an East Prussian forest spanning 6.5 square kilometers. Organization Todt has constructed a small village of camouflaged and reinforced buildings, undetectable by air. The Führerbunker itself is built from 2-meter-thick, steel-reinforced concrete and large enough to house Hitler and his inner circle. Although the Führer spends much of the war here, a number of other super expensive and labor-intensive superstructures are also built specially for him, but are barely used, if at all. For example, the Bear Cave near Smolensk is a 43 square meter subterranean superstructure, never used once by Adolf Hitler. All in all, the Führer's bunkers encompass over 1 million cubic meters of concrete and untold millions of man-hours to build. By 1943, as the air attacks against Germany intensified, High Command makes plans to expand the Führerbunker into a wider subterranean structure. The new official Führerbunker is to be 8.5 meters underneath the Reichskanzlei garden. 2 stairways that can be sealed off by heavy steel doors will lead into a complex of 30 well-furnished rooms. Everything for a man who thinks that giving his soldiers a fallback line to retreat to will have a negative effect on their morale. But the Führerbunker is not the only mega structure being constructed in Berlin. To safeguard the capital from Allied air attacks, a number of bunkers and air raid shelters must be built for protection and countermeasures. Hundreds of thousands of workers and their families need to be protected by roofs of earth and concrete. Inside of cities, however, bunker building downward is by necessity quite limited. But if you can't build down because of infrastructure like sewage systems, then you have to build up. The best examples of this are the Flak-Towers. The Flak-Tower complexes in Berlin, each consisting of a lead tower and a fighting tower, are up to 55 meters high. These massive towers are protected by armored cupolas and concrete walls of up to 3.5 meters thickness. Their primary guns are 12.8 centimeter twin flat guns, and each pack a series of anti-aircraft guns of smaller caliber. Guided by a radar system, they can deliver up to 8,000 rounds a minute in a 360-degree field of fire. These towers are basically indestructible at this time, and are also intended to be used as air raid shelters, for inside there is enough room to house thousands of people. The towers are outfitted with medical stations and enough storage and supplies to hold out on their own if need be. German engineer works also include a number of underground tunnels and deep cellars to hide and protect their valuables, and secret projects like in the subterranean tunnels of Nuremberg's medieval castle. This underground structure is used to store unique artifacts and Germany's cultural treasures, and some captured treasures as well, of course. Behind shock-resistant doors, air conditioning, and plumbing systems, the Nazis hope to protect art, statues, sculptures, and other relics inside a row of padded boxes. Deep down beneath the earth, they are to remain untouched by the bombing terror above. The German bunker building program will continue and will intensify in 1943 and beyond. As the Wehrmacht tries to hold on to the ground it has gained, Europe will see a series of bunkers and walls of fortifications being built all over. In the air raid shelters of German cities and in secret underground tunnels in the countryside, the Nazis will try to protect their people and weapons from annihilation. Many of these massive concrete superstructures are still standing today, barely touched by time, and one day, they might well be the last silent witnesses of the war. Bunkers are, after all, built to last. We did an on-location special in France on the construction of the Maginot Line a few years ago, which dispels a bunch of myths and inaccuracies about what it actually was and what it did and what it was supposed to do, and you can check that out right here. And you can join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com so we can make more specials like this and one day go on location again like that. You are what finances all of this. Do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.